Thank you, Catherine, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Hi, Mairead. How are you?
I'm very well, Larysa. How are you?
I am Larysa, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Mairead Lavery, the President and CEO of Export Development Canada. We're talking about navigating global markets. It's report card season for some. How would you rate Canada's trading landscape?
Oh dear. Well, if you're a parent, you're not going to be pretty happy with the report card at the moment. I think you're into a summer of resets for your exams. It's a particularly difficult market at the moment. Canada is falling in terms of competitiveness, in terms of productivity. And our exporters are really feeling the challenges of a geopolitical landscape for where they want to actually export to. And then at home, interest rates, inflation, labor shortages, regulations, permitting. There's lots of things I can talk about. I think they're probably pretty relieved. The governor started a rate cut last week. But it's been a very challenging time for our exporters, and it's showing.
I want to ask you about growth and what it's going to take to stimulate all of that. But maybe before we go forward, let's just unpack some of what you had just mentioned. Let's talk about geopolitics. We've been hearing all morning about some of the challenges that are facing not just exporters, but the Canadian economic landscape overall, given that there are a number of significant wars happening in Canada. How does that affect our trading corridors?
Well, I think if you take wars, and as always, there's two sides to the coin. When the Russia-Ukraine conflict started, Canadian commodities actually saw an increase because they were very much in demand and people very interested in, particularly in our agriculture products. So back 2 years ago, we actually had a bump linked to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Today, it's something very different. It's much more linked to supply chain resiliency, to logistic costs. Today, we're seeing the struggle with the rebel activity in the Red Sea. That's even more impactful because of the challenges with the Panama Canal, which is not a conflict per se. In fact, that's linked to climate action and the fact that we can't get as many ships through the port or through the canal anymore than we used to. So you see geopolitics playing in either a war scenario, the Chinese-US tensions. US remains our number one trading partner, with China as number two. So Canadian exporters wondering, do they have to make a choice? How do they think about their largest market to the south and the up and coming elections, how that's going to play out in other markets around the world? So the South China Sea, where there are conflicts happening, and both China and the US on different sides of those conflicts. So it really translates, Larysa, really rapidly into increased costs and more uncertainty. So exporters, when they're faced with those circumstances, are either going to retrench to markets and customers they know really well, or, they're just not going to be competitive on the global landscape.
You had mentioned elections. I think I read somewhere that it's the year of the election globally. Some elections that maybe Canada is watching closely, I should say, the EU, UK, Mexico, India. Let's talk about that effect to Canadian exporters. How closely are you paying attention to what's happening?
So we're paying significant attention to this. I mean, when you look at our top 5 trading partners, of course, the US sitting at number one with, $546 billion of trade. So you cannot not be interested in what's happening in the US election, number one on the list, and specifically what that might mean for CUSMA. and the new NAFTA, if we may call it that. And then you find Mexico forming part of the top 5 of our trading partners, coming in at number 5. So that trilateral free trade agreement is up, or is going to go through a renegotiation, and 2 of our top 5 trading partners are part of that. Then you see China sitting as our number 2 trading partner, the UK as number 4. So already just with our top trading partners, there's very significant considerations, because again, exporters want certainty to invest in those countries, to work with partners in those countries, and elections can be a little bit destabilizing.
I was actually surprised to see that the new NAFTA, or the USMCA, or CUSMA as you've referred to it, is up for renegotiation in 2026. It feels like not too long ago we were sitting on the fence. Will they or won't they get it done? Now we are looking at a possible Donald Trump presidency. With this conversation again coming to the forefront with respect to tariffs, how important is it for us, or is it important for us? You had mentioned our significant relationship with our partners to the U.S. For us to be in lockstep with the U.S., how important is it to harmonize what they're doing?
Oh, wow, that's a really big question. So let me take it a different angle, and I'll get back to the sort of the US question. You know, from a trade perspective, harmonization is probably one of the most important concepts. You know, if that means, because that's what makes trade easier. So you take a regional bloc like ASEAN, who are actually instigating both technology and practices to ensure the free flow of goods among the region very simply and in a harmonized fashion. Now, with 76% of our trade happening with the US and our border crossings being so active, you can imagine harmonizing trade with the US is probably the single most important thing that Canadians are looking for, because that's what keeps the flow of goods and services across our borders every day. But we need it in other places as well. So I think for Canada, we also want to see, is there other markets that we can open up to, and do it in such a fashion that allows Canadian goods and services to get to those markets as well. But there's probably nothing important. I think on the positive side, we have to remember that CUSMA was a deal done under the first Trump administration. So it is a byproduct of a Trump administration. And I think that, I guess, exercise demonstrated to a lot of states in the US how important Canada was as a trading partner. And it certainly brought the Canadian business community together to demonstrate what Canada provides to the US. And I think when you unpack your question, what I hear a lot of today compared to when I first started at EDC, when I go to countries in Asia, when I go to the US, everyone starts with talking about security, national security. And they very quickly go to elements of security. So whether that is energy security, whether it's food security, whether it's cyber security, like you can actually attach security to many different things. So I think like-minded partners are going to want to find ways to provide security across their borders. And I think you're seeing that with some of the agreements the US has entered into from an intelligence perspective. You're going to see it very significantly with respect to commodities such as critical minerals, and certainly energy and food, because these are the things that matters to populations, which then matters to politicians, which then drives where trade's going to go. So absolutely, we're going to see countries either bilaterally or through regional trading blocs coming together to secure resources for the future. And that is going to be like-minded countries.
Let's go outside of some of the countries that you had mentioned that are immediately on our radar when we think of Canada's trading partners, our partners to the south, not just the US, but Mexico as well. When you go beyond that and you take a look at other markets, can you tell us some of the other important trading partners to Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. 6 of our top 13 trading partners are in the Indo-Pacific region. So Hong Kong, Australia, South Korea, Japan, countries such as that, where we have a significant trading relationship with those countries, and countries then that we're very interested that they have a growing middle class, they have significant infrastructure needs, significant clean technology needs as many of these countries start their decarbonization journey, or indeed further electrification and power generation needs. So when you look, there is significant opportunity for Canada at this point in time. So certainly we look to the Indo-Pacific just from a demographic perspective. There is already existing relationships and lots more that we can do in that region. And very fortunate then to have the existing free trade agreements that we have with Europe and many other countries, Chile, for example, where Canada has a very large mining presence. So there's lots of areas for us to expand to. But I think we're going to see in the future these countries do that in a way that is perhaps more bilateral to try and secure the resources.
Mairead, you had touched on economic security, economic prosperity. Curious to get your thoughts on when you see a survey courtesy of the OECD and Canada's ranking. How, I guess, how troublesome is that?
It's very troublesome. I mean, there is some history in the OECD statistics for Canada, and that includes the bump that Canada got with NAFTA when NAFTA first came into effect. And we have to recognize that was a period in time in which China wasn't a significant trading nation and certainly not exporting what they do to the world today. So a very different world. So we should have expected to lose some positioning with the growth of China, but we shouldn't have expected to have lost that much. So we really have lost our competitiveness vis-a-vis our OECD peers, certainly vis-a-vis our G7 peers, but definitely our OECD peers as well.
Canada's economy, according to most recent data, has been slowing, if not stuck in neutral, as some would say. There has been all kinds of conversations on how to ramp up productivity, manufacturing, a campaign recently by some of Canada's top business leaders to encourage Canadian pension funds to invest more in Canada. Your thoughts?
So yeah, productivity, absolutely. We do have a productivity challenge in Canada. We're losing productivity per worker. And there's a few different reasons for that. So we see less non-private residential investment per worker in Canada than we would vis-a-vis the US. So not enough capital going into either technology or capital equipment to actually make our workers more productive. I think our labour as well, we also see a need for more skills development in our labour force, and then bringing both of those together to ensure that we do drive more productivity with the right use of capital and with the labour force. So there's a significant challenge for us with respect to productivity. But I am definitely a glass half full type of girl. So I sort of think, well, this is our opportunity. This is our moment in time. So we need to really encourage and we need to support our Canadian businesses that are doing the investment. And we need to support them with less bureaucracy, with less regulation, and really help businesses be able to invest faster, to invest in new technology, and to be able to think about investing abroad as well, to realize some of the opportunities. So we have a productivity challenge. The way to help it is well known, but it's going to take business and it's going to take other actors to come to the table and actually try and help drive that for Canada.
Let's talk specifically now. What's going to stimulate that growth? What is Export Development Canada doing? What are you doing to help businesses? Where are the opportunities? What sectors? I know you had touched on critical minerals. What should we be doing? What is EDC doing?
Yeah, well, we're actually, it's at one of these points. EDC was designed to be counter-cyclical, meaning that we're probably at our most effective when we're the most challenged. So whatever that is, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a war, that we were established, and someone mentioned that today, as a post-World War II institution, a Bretton Woods institution. So when you're most challenged, it's actually when there are a lot of opportunities there. So when I look at our traditional industries, and they saw a lot of transformation during the pandemic. There's a lot that we actually have to work with, whether it's our energy industry, forestry, mining, transportation, all the industries that Canada is very well known for. And we have to help them do a few things, be more productive and decarbonize. That's what we have to do. And that in itself is an investment in the economy. So number one, what we have that's working, get it working even better. Number two, and this is what we're really excited with EDC, is, okay, let's get going. Let's get going on the new sectors, whether though that happens to be nuclear and small modular reactors, whether it's hydrogen. So you see a theme here where we're really talking about the green economy, whether it's clean technology, whether it's AI, quantum, and the technology that Canada has built up, whether it's advanced manufacturing, or as we call it, resources of the future. We are so endowed with resources that many countries don't have. For example, Japan, one of the most industrialized nations in the world, their food sufficiency ratio, i.e. how much food they produce compared to how much they need, is 38%. Canada produces at 150%. That means we have available, and we can still feed our population. We have available for export at 50%, and we're still not automated enough in our agricultural production. So we have all these opportunities at this point in time, but we need some really bold moves. We're sort of back to when someone decided they needed the Trans-Pacific Highway. Like, we need to invest in our logistics, we need to invest in our new sectors, and we need to stand up on the world stage and say, Canada's willing to partner with individual companies, individual countries to actually create the conditions for success.
Just a few minutes left in our conversation. You came to EDC in 2014. Prior to that, you spent some time at Ernst & Young, at Bombardier. I'm not even going to ask you what flavor that retirement cake is going to be next year. Is it chocolate or vanilla? But over the course of the past 5 years, as you've helped to steer this ship as the president and CEO, we've gone through a pandemic where supply chains came to the spotlight. We went through post-pandemic, establishing and reestablishing those trading partners or new partnerships. And then, of course, we got walloped with inflationary pressures, a high interest rate environment. Biggest lessons learned over the course of the past few years for you at EDC?
So there's been many, and not all of them necessarily successful lessons. I've heard it, and I was with some customers this morning, and we talked about the talent that is in Canada. And I certainly saw that at EDC during the pandemic. And I think sometimes we just need to unleash the talent a lot more. And that's probably my biggest learning from the pandemic itself, was just, so I refer to EDC and the need at that time, because we had so much to do. We were like renewing everyone's loans, restructuring all the insurance agreements that we do for 27,000 customers. And we were putting out some pandemic support. You cannot do that business the same way that you did pre-pandemic. So it was like you needed to move very fast, and you needed to empower all individuals at EDC to do the right thing. And when we got that right, it was an incredible experience. And I think that for me is how I needed to listen to my staff about where we needed to invest and where the opportunities were and what was working and what we needed to try. So I guess, Larysa, if I was to summarize it, there's a sense of empowerment, a sense of experimentation that the pandemic taught us that we really needed to keep going with. And I sort of put that into any business that we need to do. But my one, probably my biggest learning, and 10 years at EDC, and I've been very fortunate. We're in the middle of a 10-year strategy at the moment, is just the sense of urgency. The opportunities in front of Canada are so significant at the moment. I know I've talked, it seems very depressing, and I'm certainly very conscious of how difficult it is for our exporters, but there's never also been as big opportunities. People do want to work with like-minded countries. They do want access to the commodities, to the value add that Canada has. They want access to Canadian talent, and they want access because that's what everyone's going to need. So critical minerals, the energy sources of the future, water, just water, for example, and food. And we have all of that. And we have all of that in sufficient capacities that we actually can bring it to the world. So that for me is probably the single biggest learning. Do never aim low, aim high, because Canada can actually deliver.
On that note, I want to thank you kindly for your time and for your insight.
Thank you.
Mairead, Lavery, thank you to all of you.